People think the greatest danger for a woman is marrying a drunkard, a gambler, or a wife beater. But I discovered that sometimes the most dangerous man you can marry is the one everyone calls a man of God, but who is a hypocrite and is hiding behind the Bible. If anyone had told me that marrying a pastor could turn my life into a prison, I would have laughed. A pastor is supposed to be a man of God, a shepherd, a guide to holiness. But what I lived through under Pastor Jonah taught me that sometimes the worst shames are hidden behind the loudest prayers. My name is Miriam, and I will never forget how it all began. I grew up in Okene, a quiet town in Kogi State. My parents were farmers, ordinary people who worked the land from morning till evening. We planted maize, yam, and cassava. We sold part of the harvest in the market and used the rest for our meals. Life was not easy, but we managed. From childhood, I was taught the value of obedience, respect for elders, and the fear of God. The church was the center of our lives, and in Okene, no church was more respected than the one pastored by Pastor Jonah Adewale. Pastor Jonah was a man who carried himself like a king. His voice was deep and commanding. His suits always neat, and his shoes polished until they shone in the sun. When he mounted the pulpit, people listened as though it was God himself that is speaking live and direct. Women admired him, men respected him, and children wanted to sit close to him. He gave large offerings, sponsored poor students, and often donated food to widows. To the outside world, he was a saint. I first caught his eyes when I was 23. At the time, I was serving in the ushering department of the church. On one particular Sunday, as the congregation prepared for the altar call, he asked me to stand beside him and hold the microphone. I stood there nervously, my heart racing. When the service ended, he called me aside. Miriam, he said, I see the hand of God upon your life. Remain humble and he will lift you up. I bowed and thanked him, not knowing those words would later trap me in a life I never imagined. Weeks later, he began to show me more attention. He would ask me to join him in visiting the sick members or to help arrange the church office. Soon, he started sending gifts to my parents, bags of rice, cartons of noodles, oil, and sometimes money. In a town like ours, such gestures were not small. My parents were overjoyed. When he finally asked for my hand in marriage, my parents saw it as God's blessing. You are favored, my mother said. A whole pastor choosing you? Do you know how many women in this town envy you? I smiled, but deep inside, I felt more fear than joy. Not because I disliked Jonah, but because I never truly knew him. Still, I agreed. In our culture, saying no to such a man was almost impossible. The wedding was grand. Members contributed, the choir sang beautifully, and Jonah spared no expenses. People clapped, women jubilated, and men congratulated my father for raising such a virtuous daughter. I became mommy pastor overnight. I went from being an ordinary farmer's daughter to a celebrated wife. People bowed when greeting me, women and children called me mommy, and they rushed to carry my handbag when they see me. But the celebration ended quickly. Behind closed doors, Jonah was not the same man who smiled at the pulpit. He was strict, controlling, and often harsh. He monitored my movements and questioned me whenever I spent more time outside than necessary. He chose what I wore, reminding me that a pastor's wife must dress modestly. He read my text messages and accused me of ungodliness if I spoke to any man longer than a minute. At first, I thought it was his way of protecting me. But soon, I realized that it was more than protection. It was control. The first time he raised his voice at me, I trembled. "You think you can shame me before my congregation?" He had thundered, simply because I had forgotten and left behind at home his favorite tea, which he takes after every service every Sunday. His words cut deeper than any slap, and I began to cry. And when he saw my tears, instead of him to comfort me, he quoted a scripture saying, "A wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands." From then on, I walked carefully, doing all I could to avoid his anger. Yet, nothing I did was ever enough. Then, I started hearing whispers about his first wife, Rebecca. People said she left him because of his bad temper. Some said she died after leaving him. Nobody talked about it openly, but I could see the fear in their eyes when they mentioned her name. When I asked Jonah about her, his face became hard and he told me never to mention her name again. He called her a curse and said I was his blessing. His words were very scary, but I kept quiet. Still, I was very curious. I carried my problems alone until Daniel came into my life. Daniel was a young man in the church choir who played the keyboard. We were also both in the drama group together. He was very kind and easy to talk to. One day after drama rehearsals, he saw that my eyes were red and asked me if I was okay. I had wanted to lie and tell him everything was okay, but I found myself overwhelmed and tears just falling down my face. And that night, I told him some of the things that were happening to me, just to get it off my chest. After that, Daniel became my secret friend. He made me laugh and reminded me what it felt like to be a person again, not just some decorated mummy pastor. Soon, we started meeting more often, and before I knew it, we started sleeping together. I am not proud of it, but at that time, I was feeling so trapped. Jonah was like a big shadow over my life, and Daniel was like the fresh air I needed to breathe. And it was Daniel who first said something that really shook me. He said to me one day, "Miriam, that man is hiding something. If Rebecca really disappeared, I believe Jonah knows why and how." At first, I had ignored Daniel, but his words stuck in my head. Slowly, I started watching Jonah more. I noticed how he would avoid any talk about his first wife, Rebecca. I saw how the other church members would look at each other whenever her name came up. I began to wonder who I was married to. One Sunday, Jonah was preaching about betrayal. His voice was very loud about it, and his eyes scanned the church until they landed on me. He said that sometimes your worst enemy is not outside but in your own house. My heart just started racing. I felt like he knew my secret with Daniel already. That night, I could not sleep. I kept asking myself, who was Rebecca? What really happened to her? And what kind of trouble had I gotten myself into? Thinking back now, I know that my relationship with Daniel wasn't born out of love, but out of desperation. At first, I only wanted someone to talk to, someone to listen to me, someone who would give me the comfort I had so yearned for. Jonah always made me feel like I was weak for being sad, as if it was a sin to feel unhappy. But Daniel was different. He listened, and that was all it took to draw me closer. As I lay beside Jonah one night, I kept thinking about Rebecca. I remembered whispers from older women saying she was unhappy and wanted to leave, but Jonah would not let her go. What I had always dismissed as mere gossip now sounded like the truth. I started paying more attention. Jonah's sermon became more aggressive, especially when he talked about betrayal. His words were getting sharper, sounding almost like direct threats to me. He would say things like, "A foolish woman destroys her own house," and that the Lord will cut off the unfaithful, all while looking directly at me. The more he preached like this, the more scared I became. But fear was not enough to stop me. I needed to know the truth. Daniel told me to search Jonah's office. He said I was closer to him and could find proof. I was scared, but the urge to find out what happened to Rebecca was stronger. So, one afternoon, while Jonah was out, I went into his study. My hands were shaking as I opened his drawers. At first, I found nothing important, just notes and some church documents. But inside a locked cabinet, which I later managed to open with a secret key he had hidden somewhere else in that office, I found a small box. Inside the box were some papers. There were documents signed by Rebecca, transferring some piece of land to Jonah. The signature looked like it was shaky, as if she was forced to sign. Below the papers was a small cloth wrapper with a dark stain on it. I did not know what it was, but my mind was telling me it was blood. I quickly put everything back before he returned and left the office. That night, I could not sleep. The image of that wrapper kept flashing in my mind. The next day when I told Daniel about it, his eyes widened and he said, "This is it, Miriam. This is the proof. Rebecca didn't just disappear. I believe Jonah probably silenced her." Daniel's words scared me, but I believed him. I started to wonder what I was going to do with this information. I knew that if I accused Jonah without solid proof, nobody would believe me. He was a man of God who everyone respected, and I was just his young wife. Meanwhile, Jonah started to suspect me even more. He saw how nervous I was and how I would not look at him in the eye. He also noticed the long hours I spent away from home and in church praying, which were actually me secretly meeting with Daniel. He started questioning me more often. His words were no longer just sermons, they were now direct threats. One evening, I came back home and found him in the living room with his Bible open. His eyes were cold and sharp. He told me that he knows that a snake doesn't announce itself before it strikes, but that I should know that the owner of the house always sees it first. My heart was racing when he said that. I knew for sure that he suspected me. The next day, I ran to Daniel. I told him Jonah knew something about us and may destroy me the way he had destroyed Rebecca. Daniel held my hand and said we had to act fast. He said we should expose Jonah. He said if we could record him confessing or find more proof, we could go to the police. He said that once Jonah was disgraced, I would be free and everything he owned would belong to me as his wife. Daniel's words sounded good, but deep down, I was afraid. I was afraid I was walking into something much more dangerous. Still, I wanted nothing more than to be free from Jonah's shadow. So, I kept on with my search, even though I knew every step was bringing me closer to a truth that might just finish me. When I went into Jonah's study for the second time, I knew I was playing with fire. But I was so curious and scared, and Daniel kept telling me to keep going. That evening, Jonah had gone for a prayer meeting at a member's house. I knew he would not be back for at least 2 hours. So I slipped into his office again. My hands were shaking as I opened the same cabinet where I had found the box before. The papers were still there, but this time I decided to search deeper. And when I did, at the bottom, under some old documents, I found a small Bible. Its cover was old and worn out. Inside, a woman had written some things. The first page made my heart pound. It said, "If anything happens to me, people should know that I wanted to leave, but Jonah would not let me go." I turned the pages with trembling fingers. She wrote about his anger and how scared she was. The last thing she wrote was, "I fear he will not let me live much longer." I just froze because I could tell that it was Rebecca's voice speaking to me from the past, warning me. I hid the Bible under my clothes and left immediately before Jonah came back. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing Rebecca's words and imagining what she must have gone through. The thought of sleeping beside the same man who might have killed her made me feel sick. The next day, I showed the Bible to Daniel. He read the notes and his eyes were wide. He said this was the proof we needed and that with it, Jonah could not escape. Meanwhile, the tension in the house got worse. Jonah's preaching became more violent. He spoke about wives being ungrateful and how God told men like him to clean sin from their house. Each time he would look at me with keen disgust. One night he confronted me. He told me that he knew what I was doing, that I was trying to be a snake. He said God shows his servants hidden things and I could not hide from him. My heart was racing because I was so sure and knew he suspected me. I called Daniel that night and told him I would not survive if I stayed there much longer. Daniel calmly told me we had to move fast and make Jonah confess on tape. Even I felt I had no other choice. A few days later, my fear became a reality. I was on the phone again with Daniel in the bedroom, talking quietly when Jonah walked in. I quickly ended the call, but it was too late. He asked me who I was talking to and I lied and said it was a woman from the church. He just looked at me with cold eyes and said I was lying. Then he said, "You think I don't know what happened to Rebecca, eh? Look, let me tell you so that you will learn. Rebecca was stubborn and wanted to leave, and she didn't listen to me. And I can see you. You are starting to look just like her. I can sense you're beginning to follow in her steps. And if you're not careful, what befell her will come to you also." He told me. My legs felt like they would give way. His words just confirmed what I had been afraid of all along. He had silenced Rebecca. That night, after he had slept, I sat in the dark, my body shaking. But I had made up my mind. I knew that if I did nothing, I would end up like Rebecca. The fear pushed me to do the most risky thing I had ever done. I called Daniel again and told him we would go ahead with the plan. I knew the only way to be free from Jonah was to make him confess. I told Daniel that we would do the plan, but not with any fancy tricks. I suggested that we hold a prayer meeting for the drama group at the church, since we were both members. I told him we would invite Jonah to come and pray for us. It was the only way I could think of to get Jonah to come and the only way we could trap him. The place had to be familiar so he wouldn't suspect. And the people we would use as witnesses would have to be people he respected, but who were not too close to him to hide his evil. I chose 3 people. Deacon Bamidele, who had been a church member for a very long time. Mama Grace, who was a quiet person but never lied. And Brother Jide, who was the electrician of the church and had keys to everywhere. I told them we needed to have a short prayer meeting at 10 p.m. for some guidance. I didn't tell them all the details of the plan. I just asked them to come, sit at the back, and wait for my signal to come forward. I also told them to put their phones on silent. And luckily, they all expected me being mommy pastor. To record Jonah's voice, I used a small voice recorder Danny had for his music rehearsals and my smartphone. That night, when Jonah arrived, everywhere was dark. He saw only me and asked where the other members of the drama group were. I told him they were on their way and we were gathering things for the rehearsals we would have after the prayer. I managed to convince him that we should start praying while we waited for the others. He agreed and we started. He started with a prayer about enemies and serpents in the house. His voice was full of anger, not even devotion. I was happy because I knew he would start this way. After he finished praying, he didn't say anything else. So I spoke just to lead him on so that our trap would succeed. I told him that I had heard somewhere that Rebecca had said that she was afraid for her life. Jonah immediately went mad when he heard Rebecca's name and asked me why I was bringing up an old issue on a holy night. I told him that holy nights are for telling the truth. He looked around and then moved closer to me. What came out of his mouth was not a sermon. It was a river of anger that he had been hiding all along. He talked about himself, about his years of fasting, how people should respect him. He said that wives must obey their husbands and that stubbornness would be punished. The more he talked, the more angry he got. And he stopped quoting the Bible. He kept going back and forth about the same topic, talking about his authority, how everybody should respect him, and most importantly, how his wives should respect him. I said Rebecca's name again, still trying to lead him on, just to stir up the anger more in him. And as I know, it made him more angrier. He shouted and called her an ungrateful woman and everybody. He said he could not allow his wife to be more successful than him and have more properties. He said she wanted to disgrace him and he had to protect the church members from seeing a non-submissive pastor's wife. I asked the one question that mattered. So, what did you do to her? He swallowed, took a deep breath and said, I had to correct her, the way a man corrects his family. I asked him again, how? He stepped closer and said, I shut the door to rebellion. I asked him again, how? Still pushing him to speak. He looked away as if talking to an empty space and then said, I removed the parasite from my house. Parasites are killed and thrown away. And I did just that. Rebecca was a parasite, so I had to eliminate her. And the same fate will meet you if you decide to be a parasite, he said, pointing his finger to me and warning me in a very calm voice but evil one. At that moment, I lifted my hand and signaled Daniel and the 3 witnesses to come out. Jonah turned and saw them. For a moment, his face showed fear, but then he quickly put on his pastor's smile and asked them if they had heard anything. At that moment, I played the voice recording. I also put Rebecca's Bible on the table in front of the 3 witnesses. Jonah's face lost its smile and he turned pale. He told me I was the sinner for going through his private things. I told him I am alive, but Rebecca is not alive today. I called the police immediately and told them we had a domestic crime with witnesses and evidences. Brother Jide locked up everywhere to stop him from leaving. The police came before midnight and took Jonah away. He tried to argue, tried to protest, saying I was trying to destroy his reputation and ministry. But the police told him to just follow them for questioning. By morning of the next day, the whole town knew the story. Jonah was put in jail. The blood-stained wrapper, Rebecca's Bible, his confession on the voice recording, and the three witnesses were the truth that was stronger than all his lies. Well, after much struggling and denial, he finally confessed to his crime and he was put behind bars. Though services continued with some new people in charge, the church members were confused and divided themselves into groups. Some people said I was brave, while others called me a tool of the devil. Well, for me, I did not care what they said. I had no interest in arguing with anyone. Then, I thought I was finally free, with the truth exposed and with Jonah behind bars. But even Daniel soon showed his true colors. His words changed from trying to comfort me to talking about properties and lands. He talked about we selling the lands together, him moving into the house, and advised that I should take over as the pastor of the church and control things, saying that because I had exposed Jonah, the church wouldn't oppose me. The more he talked, the more I saw that he also wanted to use me. One evening, he came to my house with a bag and told me we should start enjoying the money Jonah left behind without wasting time, and we should start enjoying together. And that night, I ended everything with him. I had broken Jonah's chain only to find another waiting for me. But this time, I was the one who cut it off. Well, I went back to living a normal life. I started helping the church's welfare department and lived quietly. Some people still called me mommy pastor out of habit, but I would gently correct them and say to them, just call me Miriam. That thing was enough for me. During those quiet days, I had the time to reflect. I accepted my mistakes. My silence when Jonah first showed his bad temper, my affair with Daniel, and the fear that kept me trapped for so long. But I also saw how much of a hypocrite Jonah was behind his title. He used the Bible like a whip and pretended to be holy to hide his evil. That was more dangerous than a drunkard or a gambler. And today, when women asked me for advice, I told them what I had learned. Don't call control protection. Don't hide the truth with silence. Don't just listen to a person because he's a pastor. And most of all, don't break one chain just to put on another. I will never forget Jonah's words that night. I removed the parasite from my house, he had said. He had said it with the pride of a man convinced he was right. That was when I understood the full danger of hypocrisy. A drunkard knows he is weak. A gambler knows his faults. A wife beater hides his shame. But a hypocrite with a Bible believes his violence is holy. That makes him the most dangerous of all. That is why I tell this story, not as entertainment, not for pity, but as a warning. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story and have learned from it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. I'll see you in my next story. Bye.